I got A Taste of Golden Iron on NetGala, and I kind of wanted to give it a try, and then kind of everything fell apart. So I'm going to start this review with the good. Actually, no, I'm going to start this review with a basic sum up of the story. A Taste of Golden Iron, a queer-centered romance unfolds in a fantasy world reminiscent of the Ottoman Empire. And there was even a list of, I don't know what this is, A0, AO3 style content tags. Beautiful prints, hot bodyguard, chronic anxiety, washing each other's hair and talking about ethics, found family, what we owe each other, enemies to lovers, kissing to avoid suspicion, hurt and comfort, slow burn, there's only one bed. And this sums up the whole book. So, the good stuff, the world building. I love the Ottoman Empire. I do. It's a bit of a history point that I adore. All its brutality and its sort of wars against other things. But this, other than that, other than the setting, the world building, the characters feel very YA. All of their emotions, all of their characterization, they have like one or two personality things that are just squashed in, and they're all surface level. And this book is listed as adult fantasy, and I don't know why it's listed as adult fantasy in any way, shape, or form. I think the reason it got listed as adult fantasy was the ages of the characters. But this is very much a book. Literally, this is a YA novel, and it feels like it. The characters feel like it. They're very shallow and very generic, and it's very generic. I've read this story, bodyguard, prince, princess, fall in love. I've read this story many times. The story beats felt familiar. The characters felt familiar. What little characterization there was. And I'm laughing at the Goodreads reviews. Also, side note, the American cover with the people on it looks so much like a Magic the Gathering card, and I don't mean that in a complimentary way. I really detest covers like this because it screams YA. Again, this is meant to be an adult fantasy, but the European cover is this rather pretty, almost old tome-looking thing that's pretty, that's actually very classy. But this book isn't. And I mean that. I don't know who this book is for. It screams of many other books that are gay or queer. I hate the word queer. Centered books. People call me that, and I'm like, go away. Very queer-centered books that seem to be written with women in mind. You could easily gender swap these characters and it wouldn't change a thing. The characters are boring, shallow. The romance is very much, long forlorn looks and I just touched your hand by mistake. It's absolutely generic, and it's a shame that it is generic, because it had the makings of something interesting. It could have been done. It could have used these tropes in a different way, but I don't think the writer really knew what she was writing. That's the only way I can describe it. She comes from a fan fiction background, which also now makes a lot of sense because of the overall style of writing. There's story beats in there that do come straight from fan fiction. The dun 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 moment, leaving chapters on a cliffhanger, which works, by the way. I have no problems with chapters on cliffhangers, but it feels very fanficky. Fan fiction of a book that doesn't exist, and it's a real shame. It had the makings of a good novel, and this was not it in the slightest, and it's a shame. I do kind of get sick of books like this, because it's like the same stuff over and over and over again, where no one in this book just, it doesn't flow, it doesn't feel right, and the writing isn't good. And I know I'm going to be really unpopular for this one, and I do wonder if this started as like a YA read. Just going by, I was like, oh, I need to age up these characters or something. And it's, again, I don't know who this book is for, because it's definitely not for me. And I mean that. It's definitely not for me. in any way, shape or form. And I think this book is great if you are like a first-time fantasy reader type person, maybe, or a younger fantasy reader. But it's so simplistic that even as a teenager I maybe would have found this slightly insulting. Like I said, the world building is really good, the characterization is terrible, and this is a flaw that I'm seeing with a lot of fantasy. It's so, especially modern fantasy from this kind of ilk of writer, that we must create these characters. Sexuality, gender identity is their entire personality. The romance feels tacked on and hammy. It's unbelievably cheesy in parts as well, but I've read this book so many times. To the point of I've read more or less this exact story many times. And when it's done well, it's done well, but when it's done badly, this is the prime example of it. So yeah, great world building, great setting. The descriptives are lovely, but the characters are boring flat and the story is generic and dull. And it's a real shame.